Hey gang, Marc Junkerman here again, come to you from Junk's Yard. And again, I am a an active law enforcement commander in the state of Maryland and also a friend of the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation. So I'm zooming to you again with another CISM perspective. The last time we talked a little bit about the impact of personal culture or culture across the board, let's say a general culture and how that affects how we react to critical incidents. So John Lennon actually said, the more I see, the less I know. And that is something when we talk about the culture of public safety, first responders, and public service people who support those first responders. That's a quote that kind of rings home because, you know, the things we see, good and bad, most people wouldn't believe it. We could all write a book in some form or fashion with some of those things. So our culture, we've already talked about the fact that, you know, we have a critical incident. The incident throws us out of equilibrium. Our body's trying to process, put the puzzle pieces back together. It's not the event itself. A lot of times it's the impact or how we perceive that event, our ability to process or not process that event. That is just across the board a human being. That's how we react to those things. We also know that having that good information and also a good support system, social support system, are great ways to help us weather that storm. The COVID situation, the unrest have impeded our ability to do those two key things to a certain extent. And as a first responder, our first responder culture, it actually is another layer on top of the challenges we already face just as human beings. And why is that? First of all, you're a trapeze artist. You come into this job, you're highly trained, you are specifically selected, you're expected to go out there and do a challenging, often dangerous job every night with zero fail. That's a tall order. So a lot of the traits we look in hiring those people who can do that job are things like loyalty and stoicism and ability to adapt and you know, all these good things. The problem is that before you even came on this job, before you were a police, fire, a clinician, a chaplain, a soldier, whatever you designate your job to be, you were a person. You were a human being who was already re-socialized in some form or fashion. Let's face it, from the time you're little, you're being groomed, you're being indoctrinated, you are being inculcated into a culture. You're gaining knowledge in different sort of aspects. And some of those things are good and some of those things maybe are not so good. And that's what you're bringing to the table. So you're already bringing to the table a package that you call you. And it has the salt in it as well as the sweet. The problem comes in with a lot of times as first responders, what we do is we distill you down because we want the sweet, we want the good parts, we really don't want to deal with the salt. And that doesn't mean that salt goes away. It just means now you have these salty pieces of you that you need to do something with. So what do you do with them? Usually you throw them, as I like to say, in my rucksack, and we don't want to hear about it. We don't want to deal with that right now. You're here for this reason. And you start to carry them on your back. And throughout your career, throughout your life, if you keep taking those pieces, that salt that is still part of you, it gives you your particular flavor, and you keep throwing them in your backpack, that pack's going to get really heavy. And that's going to be something hard to carry throughout your career. And that's going to cause us challenges down the road. And that's what we talk about here when we talk about this public safety, public service culture. We walk into a situation that's often quantified or classified as paramilitary. Not a big fan of that term. To me, that's like being a little bit dead. You're either military or you're not. And when you start trying to para things, make a paramilitary or para this or para that, basically what that says a lot to me is we're taking the parts that we want to deal with and throwing the salty ones on our back, like those other parts. So sometimes it doesn't translate like we think it will, and we can see that particularly in the challenges we're facing most recently. The other thing is it's reactive. A lot of what we do, and we talked about that, we're first responders. We respond to an incident. We respond to mitigate, which is why it is so important that we start having that conversation and moving that dial back to a point where we're talking about what are we doing for ourselves and for our organizations to inoculate ourselves on the front end. Remember that Johns Hopkins resiliency model, that how are we building that resistance now before these bad things happen? Because they're going to happen. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So you take those things, and a lot of times I call it, we go from stoic to strike. We eat a lot of our emotions. We eat a lot of the pain. We bite our tongue more often than not, and we're stoic until the bell rings, and then we have to react, and we go 100 miles an hour, whether it's fighting a fire, whether it's a medical call, or whether it's a shooting call as a law enforcement officer, whether it's a dispatcher who has to pick up that really critical 911 call where somebody's screaming for help. So we go from 0 to 60 a lot. That changes us. That changes the way we process things. It can change us physiologically because of, as we know, the stress hormones, the epinephrine, the norepinephrine, the cortisol, all the things that are happening when you have these continuous and constant stress sort of reactions, all these chemicals in your body. It's a physiological reaction. So you have the physiological, you also have the psychological, and then the social aspect of it kicks in. And one of the scariest things that we do is we tend to isolate ourselves. Okay, and we've all done this. We've all walked into a room and you look around and you just make the decision that everybody in that room's an idiot. So again, remember, if you walk into a room and everybody but you's an idiot, there's a common denominator, and we tend to isolate ourselves as first responders. It's part of our nature. We tend to self-medicate. We tend to be thrill seekers sometimes starting off. We tend to be highly motivated type A personalities. All these things can work against us in these situations, particularly when we realize that our sort of mission of controlling a situation, of making a situation better, of trying to quote unquote fix something, is almost impossible when we're dealing with some of the challenges that we're facing in current events. You can't arrest a virus. You can't do it. You can't put water on a virus. Even as a medic, there's only certain things you can do. We can treat the symptoms of the virus, but we can't eradicate it. You can't, as a dispatcher, fix that over the phone. As a clinician, you can't fix it. As a chaplain, you can't fix it. And that's a challenge. We're actually fighting something that is totally different than what we're used to. With some of the unrest and some of the challenges we have with the people expressing themselves and expressing their First Amendment right. Not only can we not really control that, but the tradition we talked about. Remember, we talked about that head, heart, and hands with the knowledge, tradition, and experience. Some of that tradition, some of the things, some of the core values that we were kind of raised on, or some of the things that we were taught that this is the norm for our culture, are actually being challenged. And here's the thing, you know what? I've found that, people will, if you're right and you tell people you're right, they can accept that. But sometimes when we get righteous, even if you're right and you're righteous, people won't take that, won't take you seriously, or won't consider your viewpoint. Here's what I'm talking about. That when you challenge somebody's heart, that's sometimes worse than challenging their head, because knowledge and numbers and empirical data, that can sort of sway conversation. But if you start challenging who somebody is at their core, that's a hard pill to swallow, even if you're right. Even if there is some things that need to be changed. And that's a conversation we're trying to have right now across the globe. So we have this isolation, we have this self-medication, we have this inability to control, even though we are the people who are supposed to control this stuff. And that's going to create challenges on a daily basis. So some of the things that we recommend along those lines, first of all, is some of the models, some of the interventions that we generally use after a critical incident, we are a challenge again, or a struggle now because of social distancing. But the one that is kind of bread and butter, and I've heard a lot of people using it and talking about it, is the old CMB. Having that information group where you get sort of, even if it's a heterogeneous group, and you get some information out, roll call briefings, admin briefings, things that your executive puts out, a consistent information flow that helps people understand not only maybe what they're dealing with, but what the expectations are of how we're going to move together as a group. So that CMB is a huge tool, or a great tool, that we can use right now in an environment where we can't always get everybody in the room, because you can use that in sort of a virtual mode. Is it better in person? We can argue all day long the techniques and what's better and what may be more effective. The bottom line is we kind of got what we got, and we have to adapt our current models to meet the situations. So when we do those briefings, again, it's important to make sure that we're giving our troops the current information. We're setting expectations. We're ensuring that their personal needs are met. It's hard to go out and be the police or be a firefighter if I'm concerned about my own family. So stressing the fact that we need to take care of ourselves. We need to take care of our families. We need to do this inoculation every day on the front end. Follow that mantra. I'm going to adjust here a little bit as the sun comes and hits the side of my head. That mantra of every day making sure you have a purpose when you wake up. You take ownership for yourself and you're accountable to and for your peers. That ability to make sure that we can help ourselves so we can help other people. And again, to ensure that we are very cognizant of the fact that information and news, however you get it, flows very quickly and changes. We are in a changing, fluid environment, and we're going to have to adapt to that. So adaptability, solid information, and that social sort of construct, that social structure to know that we're not all, you're not isolated. You have a team that's with you, and that social support is a huge part of getting us through. Our next CISM perspective that we'll do in the future here is going to talk about how we actually start applying those lessons. And we're going to talk about three specific things. First of all, a term we call left of bang, which has been very popular in literature and in the news recently. So what's the left of bang concept of risk management and interdicting on the front end? The idea that we win by design, not by default. And that in the end, if you can do that and you can take care of the me, that we're all peers. Everybody's a peer. We're all accountable to and for each other. So that would be one of the future CISM perspectives, hopefully that we bring to you from Junk's Yard. Again, zooming in, we're learning about the sun, we're learning about trash trucks coming by and all these good things that happen in the first responder world. So I'm figuring if we can pull this off from Junk's Yard, we can pull this off from just about anywhere. Most importantly, remember, it's not just enough to survive the day. You need to decide to thrive. Be safe, be well. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.